The first time I uttered a prayer was in a glass-stained cathedral. I was kneeling long after the congregation was on its feet, dipped both hands into holy water, traced the Trinity across my chest, my tiny body drooping like a question mark all over the wooden pew. I asked Jesus to fix me. And when he did not answer, I befriended silence in the hopes that my sin would burn and salt, my mouth would dissolve like sugar on tongue, but shame lingered as an aftertaste. In an attempt to reintroduce me to sanctity, my mother told me of the miracle I was, said I could grow up to be anything I want. I decided to be a boy. It was cute. I had snapped back, toothless grin, used skin knees as street cred, played hide and seek with what was left of my girl. I was it, the winner to a game the other kids couldn't play. I was the mystery of an anatomy, a question asked but not answered, tight roping between awkward boy and apologetic girl. And when I turned 12, the boy phase wasn't deemed cute anymore. It was met with nostalgic aunts who missed seeing my knees in the shadow of skirts, who reminded me that my kind of attitude would never bring a husband home, that I exist for heterosexual marriage and childbearing, and I swallowed their insults along with their slurs. Naturally, I did not come out of the closet. The kids at my school opened it without my permission, called me by a name I did not recognize, said lesbian, but I was more boy than girl, more Ken than Barbie. It had nothing to do with hating my body. I just love it enough to let it go. I treat it like a house, and when your house is falling apart, you do not evacuate. You make it comfortable enough to house all your insides. You make it pretty enough to invite guests over. You make the floorboards strong enough to stand on. My mother fears I have named myself after fading things, as she counts the echoes left behind by Maya Hall, Leela Alcon, Blake Brockington. She fears that I'll die without a whisper, that I will turn into what a shame conversations at the bus stop. She claims I've turned myself into a mausoleum, that I am walking casket. News headlines has turned my identity into a spectacle. Bruce Jenner on everyone's lips, while the brutality of living in this body becomes an asterisk at the bottom of equality pages. No one ever thinks of us as human, because we are more ghost than flesh, because people fear that my gender expression is a trick, that it exists to be perverse, that it ensnares them without their consent, that my body is a feast for their eyes and hands, and once they have fed off my queer, they'll regurgitate all the parts they did not like. They'll put me back into the closet, hang me with all their other skeletons. I will be the best attraction. Can you see how easy it is to talk people into coffins, to misspell their names on gravestones, and people still wonder while there are boys rotting their girl away in high school hallways. They're afraid of becoming another hashtag in a second, afraid of classroom discussions becoming like Judgment Day. And now, oncoming traffic is embracing more transgender children than parents. I wonder how long it will be before the trans suicide notes start to feel redundant, before we realize that our bodies become lessons about sin way before we learn how to love them. Like God didn't save all this breath and mercy, like my blood is not the wine that washed over Jesus' feet. My prayers are now getting stuck in my throat. Maybe I am finally fixed. Maybe I just don't care. Maybe God finally listened to my prayers. Thank you.
Good morning. We are coming into the next chapter in this module. It's a poem written by Lee Mokobe. And the name of the poem is What It Is Like to Be Transgender. As I told you, it's a module on gender. So the chapters, the poems, the stories, the articles, everything deals with gender. So in this poem, it's a poem that depicts the life of transgender, the feelings of transgender. Being Lee Mokobe a transgender, she is describing the life of transgender realistically. And before coming into this, let me just go through the introduction part. I'm not going deep into this as usual. I'm just I'm just reading the important part in this introductory part. See, Lee Mokobe. She was born in 1996 in Cape Town, South Africa. And Mokobe is an award-winning slam poet. A slam poem is a poem which is written to be performed on stage. As I shown a video of Lee Mokobe, she was performing this poem on a stage. She was performing this on a TED Talk program. See what it is like to be transgender is a poem and which is written to be performed, and she was performing that on the stage. So she is a award-winning slam poet and founder of Vocal Revolutionaries, a volunteer-run literary organization focused on empowering youth of South Africa to find their voice through art. And her team has participated in a very famous American stage program, Brave New Voice Global Poetry Competition. It's an event of American Poetry Slam which began in 1998 in Chicago. She was the finalist. And let's come to the next paragraph. Lee Mokobe has been a TED Fellow since 2015. You know, TED Talk is a very famous show in English, and she has been a TED Fellow since 2015. Then, and as a performer, he wrote several plays, has made a few short films with the help of media company Soul Pancake at the YouTube Space Studio. And the 21st-year-old writer is a political activist who criticizes the lack of freedom of expression in South Africa and the extreme right-wing politics of Donald Trump, the President of the United States, in a poem titled The Not Yet Burning Country. So she is a political activist, he or she, we could say. By gender, it is she is a anatomic. By anatomy, she is a girl, but she wants to live as a boy. So that is why here we can use he. Then what it is like to be transgender is a soul-bearing poem about what it feels like to be a transgender in a highly gendered culture. See, as we all know, in our culture, in our society, only two genders are highly considered, male or female. And the other gender, transgender, the term transgender is ignored by the society, and we are not giving much attention to the problems of these transgenders nowadays. So it powerfully addresses the gender identity issues in the context of transphobia and the increased suicide rates among the transgender people. And transphobia is a term which is described the dislike or prejudice against transsexual or transgender people. So, at the context of transphobia, there are many suicide cases among the transgender people, and this is considered as an autobiographical poem, and the writer himself describes his experiences when he was living like a transgender. So she is explaining through the lines as she was or he is transgender and he wish to live like a boy, even by anatomic structure she has a girl, sorry, she is a girl. So now let's come to the text in this poem. The first time I uttered a prayer was in a glass stained cathedral. I was kneeling along after the congregation was on its feet. Dip both hands into holy water, trace the Trinity across my chest, my tiny body drooping like a question mark. So the first time I uttered a prayer was in a glass stained cathedral. So he was saying like the first prayer in his life was in a cathedral. It was in a church. It was in a glass stained church. So that was his first prayer. ഇവർ ആദ്യമായി പ്രാർത്ഥിച്ചത് ഒരു ഗ്ലാസ് കൊണ്ട് ചിത്രങ്ങൾ വരച്ച് ഗ്ലാസ്സുകളൊക്കെ ഉള്ള ഒരു കത്തീഡ്രലിലായിരുന്നു. I was kneeling long after the congregation was on its feet. I was kneeling long after the congregation was on its feet. Congregation, അവിടെ നടന്നിരുന്ന ആ പ്രാർത്ഥന ഒക്കെ കഴിഞ്ഞ് കുറേ സമയങ്ങൾക്ക് ശേഷവും ഞാൻ അവിടെ പ്രാർത്ഥിച്ചിരുന്നു. Dip both hands into holy water. Dip both hands into holy water. എൻ്റെ രണ്ട് കൈകളും I dipped into the holy water. അവിടെയുള്ള ആ പരിശുദ്ധമാക്കപ്പെട്ട വെള്ളത്തിൽ മുക്കിക്കൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ പ്രാർത്ഥിച്ചിരുന്നു. So she was confused. ഇവളുടെ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റിയിൽ ഭയങ്കര കൺഫ്യൂസ്ഡ് ആണ്. She was not sure whether she was a boy or a girl. ഈ ഒരു കാര്യത്തിൽ വല്ലാത്ത കൺഫ്യൂഷനാണ്. ഇവൾ ശരീരം കൊണ്ട് ഗേളാണെങ്കിലും മനസ്സുകൊണ്ട് ഇവൾ ഒരു ബോയ് ആണ്. സോ ഇവൾ വല്ലാത്ത കൺഫ്യൂഷനിലാണ്. സോ ഷി വാസ് പ്രേയിങ് ടു ഗോഡ്. Trace the Trinity across my chest. So she traced the cross across her chest. കുരിശ്, ചെസ്റ്റിലൂടെ കുരിശൊക്കെ വരച്ചു. As in Christian belief, my tiny body drooping like a question mark. And my small body, it was bending like a question mark. എൻ്റെ ചെറിയ ശരീരം ഒരു ചോദ്യചിഹ്നം പോലെ അവിടെ ഇങ്ങനെ വളഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. So she was in front of the God and she was praying to God to give a reflection, to give her a reflection on her identity. എന്താണ് അവളുടെ ഐഡൻറ്റിറ്റി എന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ചിട്ട് ഒരു ഐഡിയ കിട്ടാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് she was standing before the God. All over the wooden pew is the bench in a church. So she was praying sitting on this wooden pew. I asked Jesus to fix me. I asked Jesus to fix my gender. I need a decision on my gender. What gender was I? ഞാൻ എന്ത് ജെൻഡർ ആയിരുന്നു എന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ചിട്ട് എനിക്കൊരു ഫിക്സേഷൻ, ഒരു തീരുമാനം കിട്ടണം. സോ ഐ ആസ്ക്ഡ് ജീസസ്. ദൈവത്തോട് ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചു ഞാൻ. ആൻഡ് വെൻ ഹി ഡിഡ് നോട്ട് ആൻസർ, I befriended silence in the hope that my sin would burn and salve my mouth would dissolve like a sugar on tongue. I didn't get any answer from Jesus, from God. Jesus didn't show my identity, my gender. So I befriended silence and silence became my friend. അങ്ങനെ ദൈവത്തോട് ചോദിച്ച സമയത്ത് എനിക്ക് ദൈവത്തിൻ്റെ കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് മറുപടി കിട്ടാത്തപ്പോൾ നിശബ്ദതയെ ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ കൂട്ടുകാരനാക്കി. in the hope. I was in hope that my sin would burn. ഞാൻ നല്ല പ്രതീക്ഷയിലാണ് ശരിക്കും നിശബ്ദതയെ ഞാൻ കൂട്ടുകാരനാക്കിയത്. എന്താണത്? മൈ സിൻ വുഡ് ബേൺ, എൻ്റെ പാപങ്ങളൊക്കെ നശിച്ചു പോകും. ആൻഡ് സാൾവ് മൈ മൗത്ത്, മൈ സിൻ വുഡ് ബേൺ ആൻഡ് സാൾവ്, എൻ്റെ പാപങ്ങളെല്ലാം ഒരുകി ലയിച്ച് ചേരുമെന്ന് ഞാൻ പ്രതീക്ഷിച്ചു. എങ്ങനെയാ? മൈ മൗത്ത് വുഡ് ഡിസോൾവ് ലൈക്ക് ഷുഗർ ഓൺ ടങ്, നമ്മുടെ വായിലുള്ള പഞ്ചസാര നാവിനോട് ചേരുന്ന പോലെ എൻ്റെ പാപങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഒരു ഓയിൽമെൻറ്റ് പോലെ, ഒരു ലായനി പോലെ എൻ്റെ ശരീരത്തിൽ നിന്നും എൻ്റെ അലിഞ്ഞു ചേർന്നില്ലാണ്ടായി പോകുമെന്ന് ഞാൻ പ്രതീക്ഷിച്ചു. ബട്ട് ഷെയിം ലിങ്കേർഡ് ആസ് എൻ ആഫ്റ്റർ ടേസ്റ്റ്, പക്ഷേ എൻ്റെ നാണക്കേട്, ഷെയിം ലിങ്കേർഡ് ആസ് എൻ ആഫ്റ്റർ ടേസ്റ്റ്, പക്ഷേ എൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ ആ നാണക്കേട് അവിടെ നിലനിന്നു, പോകാൻ മടിച്ചു നിന്നു. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ ആ നാണക്കേട് അവിടെ നിലനിന്നിരുന്നു. അപ്പം ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ പാപങ്ങളൊക്കെ എന്നിൽ നിന്നും തുടച്ചു നീക്കപ്പെടുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിച്ചു. പക്ഷേ എനിക്ക് നാണക്കേട് മാത്രമാണ് അവശേഷിച്ചത്. And we will come to the remaining part in the next class. Thank you.